us back at the Newcastle United Media Centre, where we have been speaking to not Eddie Howe this morning, Jason Tindall stepping in as he has on the training ground this week, also at the Media Centre, because Eddie Howe is ill.
Yeah, big blow. I mean, to be fair,
Eddie Howe is a workhorse. It would take a lot to keep him away from that place.
Yeah.
And Jason Tindall said really poorly this week. So, yeah, it is a blow. Get well soon, Eddie.
Yeah, bedridden, really poorly. You're right, it's very unlike Eddie Howe, which tells you he's struggling because, to be fair, Eddie Howe's credit, as much as Jason Tindall stepped in for a couple of press conferences now, he rarely misses his media duties, Eddie Howe. The only difference this time is when Jason Tindall last year, when he took the press conference out of the Luton Town game, I think it was, Eddie Howe was still at the training ground taking training, whereas obviously this time Eddie Howe has had that bad of an illness where he can't leave his bed by the sounds of it, but is expected to be back on the touchline for Sunday. But yeah, it doesn't sound too pretty at the moment. I think even Jason Tindall said if the game was tomorrow, he would be a doubt.
Sounds strange.
It does, yeah.
To refer to a manager like that, but yeah, I mean, get well soon, Eddie. It doesn't sound too great, but yeah, it's not. Jason Tindall said it's not a huge blow for Newcastle because Newcastle are so meticulous. Eddie Howe's so meticulous that it hasn't affected preparations. That was the message he was keen to stress ahead of Sunday's match against Manchester United at St James's Park. And in terms of, I've spoken about Eddie Howe's fitness, what about this team's fitness? Because Jason Tindall, I mean, we joked last time he took a press conference, Jason Tindall, he said players who were quite clearly injured had a chance of playing. Take what he says with a pinch of salt, even more than you would Eddie Howe. But yeah, what was the injury latest from the Newcastle assistant? Yeah,
Anthony Gordon's returned
back on the grass.
I done a session on Thursday, so they're seeing how he's reacted to that. We'll assess him ahead of Sunday's game. But at the end of his answer, Jason Tindall did slip up a little bit by saying he pretty much confirmed he's going to be on the bench.
Best case scenario would be he's on the bench.
Yeah, which a little slip up because usually if it was Eddie Howe, he would leave things open.
He gives nothing away.
He would leave things open, whereas Jason Tindall has confirmed that if Anthony Gordon is available, he will be on the bench. Which, look, it isn't a major surprise, but it's not used to being a manager.
Yeah, you usually
confirm that.
Yeah, you usually when you hear Eddie Howe give an update, you go, well, logic would suggest Anthony Gordon after over a month out and a really bad knock, as Eddie Howe described it, and Harvey Barnes being in relatively good form. Logic would suggest Harvey Barnes would keep his place, but now Jason Tindall, without meaning to, accidentally has probably confirmed that Harvey Barnes starts on Sunday, which you'd expect.
Isn't a surprise, is it? Yeah. It's not a major surprise. I think, to be fair to Harvey Barnes, he's certainly earned his position over the last few months. I think he's put himself in the driving seat on that left-hand side. I think it would be really, really harsh if he was to be dropped for Anthony Gordon as soon as he's fit. I think Eddie Howe is always a person that has played players on merit, if you like, and Harvey Barnes has certainly got himself in there on merit. And it's as much as Anthony Gordon is an absolutely fantastic player and is in Newcastle United's best 11, whilst Harvey Barnes has got the jersey, I think it's his shirt to lose.
Yeah, and I think naturally 3 games in a week would lend the squad to some sort of rotation, you'd imagine. So that's potentially a chance for Anthony Gordon to come back in either against the Crystal Palace or the following weekend. So yeah, I think Newcastle realistically, based on what Jason Tindall was saying and based on what you hear, and after winning 4 games in a row, you'd expect, having named an unchanged 11 for the last 4 games, they'd do the same on Sunday.
Yeah.
In any late twists.
Yeah, I would be surprised if he changed it. I think Eddie Howe has always said you don't really want to change a winning team either. You want to keep that sort of continuity, if you like. So I don't expect to see any changes, and yeah, I don't think anyone can have complaints. I think Newcastle's squad's quite thin at the moment anyway.
It is, yeah.
To be honest, bar Anthony Gordon, really, I don't know what changes you could possibly make. To be honest, I think the team picks itself.
It does, yeah, it does. No Joe Willock either. Not that he was in serious contention to come in, but yeah, I think that's it. Same team again, barring any late blows. Jason Tindall was asked about Alexander Isak.
Harry Walkett.
Sounds like he's going to be fine.
Yeah.
But monitor his fitness. It's
Yeah.
always a question. There's always going to be questions about Alexander Isak one way or the other.
It's
because he's so important.
Exactly,
and, obviously, if you're talking about Alexander Isak, writing about him, people want to read it.
Exactly. It's he's a world class striker in a lot of people's FPL teams, which I haven't played FPL for a long time, but it's quite big, isn't it?
It's quite remarkable how serious people take it.
And it's obviously it'll be the same view on our websites, etc. There's a lot of Google search on Alexander Isak, bit of insight here into
In our
local media.
workings, yeah.
Whereas, an Alexander Isak injury story, people are, it's a Friday deadline or whatever before they pick the FPL team for the weekend, are searching, is Alexander Isak going to be fit this weekend? If not, I better take him out. Or should I triple captain him?
It's a double game week.
So that's, and that's why Alexander Isak, I think it's him more than anyone, because he's probably, out of all the strikers of the Premier League, I would suspect he's in most teams. I mean, obviously, bar like Haaland.
I don't know at the moment.
I think is Salah classed as a different position on FPL. I don't know. I'm going down a totally like an avenue I don't really understand. I get the gist of it, but basically Alexander Isak is really important, and people from the outside Newcastle United also care about Alexander Isak's fitness. If you are indeed an FPL lover,
yes, which we're not.
No, I'm not. I haven't played for a long time.
No. So.
Just want total.
Yes.
Total.
But in terms of Jason Tindall, I thought there wasn't an awful lot to come from Jason Tindall in terms of like the news side of things. I thought you raised an interesting question about his touchline behaviour. Obviously, he's been subject to an investigation from the FA this season, was sent off earlier in the season against Aston Villa, sort of cleared of all charges, but has been booked twice this season. That's one booking away from a touchline ban. I mean, it's not significant for Newcastle. It probably doesn't change an awful lot, but when you're wondering, is Eddie Howe going to be on the touchline? Jason Tindall could be on the touchline, and then all of a sudden face a ban.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because he's within the first couple of words of his response, he says, "I don't usually pick up cards." You just named 3 there.
Yeah.
But to be fair, before the season, I don't think he had picked up many cautions. It just seems to all spiraled this season.
Yeah.
But that's why Newcastle fans love him. It's like, he gets the tag Mad Dog because he does things like that, and he's not really bothered. And he made the point on there again that he doesn't really care what people think when he is who he is. Fair play to him. But yeah, one yellow card away from a ban. Asked, can he avoid it? Said, of course he can. He gets on well with the officials on the touchline. So yeah, he's got to get through 8 games to avoid a touchline ban. I think he will. But he's always on there that maybe tests the water.
Yeah, he's an interesting character, Jason Tindall, as I'm sure you guys know, but having seen him, sort of spoken to him in person, met him in person, he's a very different character. He's a lot more reserved, a lot more laid back, I think, speaking to him in press conferences or face-to-face than he is perhaps on the touchline. He's got a game mode, a match day mode, as a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting sort of dynamic Jason Tindall has within himself, and he was asked about that, and he said, yeah, you just almost switch it on and off. It's a different personality as such.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he has a title Mad Dog for what he does on the touchline, and it's quite entertaining to watch. But I would agree. I saw when you speak to him, I've spoken to him a couple of times now in press conferences, and he's not the sort of.
It's almost a shyness, I'd say.
Which is
strange because you'd say if there's anyone who's not shy, it's Jason Tindall.
But there's a lot of people who are like that, aren't there? Where it's very reserved off the field, and then when you're on the field or on the touchline, you're a different beast.
Yes.
So no, it's a nice change. I enjoy speaking to Jason Tindall. I like speaking to Eddie Howe as well. Yeah, but we get Eddie Howe most weeks. Of course, he's the manager. So as much as it was enforced, it was a nice little change. I would say a different perspective, albeit he probably does give similar. Doesn't give a lot away in terms of questions and what I mean about that is when he was asked about sort of like Champions League football and whatever, he's quite reserved, as Eddie Howe would be.
Yeah.
So he's maybe that's why they've been together for so long, is because they're quite the same in that sense.
Yeah, Jason Tindall's a bit like Eddie Howe was maybe a couple seasons ago. I think Eddie Howe has opened up and softened slightly with the media a little bit.
Yeah,
I think certainly after the cup win as well. The past few press conferences, he's been a bit more.
Oh no, I agree with that. I'm not for 1 minute saying Eddie Howe is not upbeat. I just think in terms of when you push Eddie Howe for an answer on something where, say, for example, Jurgen Klopp said something about him last season, and then you put Eddie Howe, he's very, very he doesn't say anything about it. Champions League, to be fair, usually I would say bat away questions on that, but did admit there was a game changer at the start of the season. But there is a lot of questions where you would put Eddie Howe and you'd hope to get a response that would make a headline.
Yeah.
But he doesn't really give you headlines, and that's perfect. For a manager, that's great. It's just not great for us.
Yeah. But looking ahead, Manchester United on Sunday, always a big game, but it's a strange one because I don't think Newcastle have ever been further ahead of Manchester United in the Premier League table. They're 15 points clear of them with a game in hand. If they win on Sunday, guaranteed for pretty much mathematically anyway, second successive season finishing above them. It's mad to think, really.
Yeah, I mean, there was the first time they could do a double over them since 95.
Yeah.
Which, I mean...
In 95, yeah.
95, yeah. Yeah, no, that's right, yeah.
In a long time.
Yeah.
Historians let us know. It's,
Which is, I think it's remarkable, but even before they won at Old Trafford early on in the season, it was something like one Premier League win in ever. Well, yeah.
Yeah, at Old Trafford.
I was thinking more top division, and I'm sure it was like you had to go back to the 80s for top division or
70s.
Something. Was it 70? I'd say I don't know any of this. I'm glad you're here. But it just shows like how much golf in class, not golf in class, but there's been a massive difference between the two football clubs, and it's quite interesting to see the dynamic has shifted. Man United will always be a big football club, and they'll come back from where they are, because big football clubs do that, but the tables have turned a little bit in terms of Newcastle United.
Just this big six, and we touched on it in our last video, it's just been completely ripped apart, really. It's been shaken up. The big six is mainly just a way to refer to the 6 teams who generate the most revenue, rather than actually the 6 most competitive teams in the league. And it's good to see. Check out our last video for full thoughts on that. But yeah, it's rare. Newcastle have won 4 of the last 5 against Manchester United, having let's say had a very questionable record before that. To win 4 of 5 against Manchester United, and to, I think, Old Trafford, the first half earlier in the season back in December, they battered them. St James's Park, the past few games, have battered them. It's going to be a tough game, as they always are, but yeah, it's a strange feeling going into games against Manchester United with a sense of confidence and almost a belief Newcastle will win, and it's really important they do win, because there's not many games left. They're in a good position, they're 5th in the table. That will be enough for Champions League qualification as guaranteed this week. But you look at some of the games everyone else playing, Aston Villa playing Southampton, Man City, Crystal Palace, everyone else you'd expect almost pick up a few points. Newcastle, Manchester United, I'd say historically probably the toughest game of all the teams who are playing. It's necessary the win almost just to keep the momentum building in and carry on doing what they're doing, because last season was such a big boost where everyone else bar Villa dropped points, and now it's like it looks like a lot of people are going to pick up points.
The Manchester United game is the easiest on paper, isn't it? But it's one of them. You go back that fact, well, it's Manchester United.
Yeah.
But Newcastle have really had Manchester United's number in the last couple of years. I know they got beat there at Old Trafford last year, but in terms of performances against them, the only time they've won a bad performance against them in recent time was the Carabao Cup final. St James's Park, they've wiped the floor with them. Yeah. It was a 1-0 win last season. I think after they'd just played 90 minutes or more in Paris, I think it was that week. I'm sure it was a Champions League game that week.
Yes, yeah. They played Chelsea, PSG, Man U, I think. Okay.
And they've totally wiped the floor with them every single time, and I do expect more of the same on Sunday, to be honest. But I think what I would say about Man U is that they've made sort of minor improvements in recent weeks. I watched them last night. They defended well last night. They should have won. Obviously, conceded a last-minute goal, but it's still an alright result in the first leg of a Europa quarter-final. And then even Manchester City last week. I mean, it was a grim football match. It was probably one of the worst in terms of how the build-up between two teams playing the derby, it was probably one of the worst matches I've ever seen. But I'm seeing from having seen Manchester United when they played Newcastle earlier. What day was it? When did they play Manchester United? Was it December?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was the last game of 2024.
Yeah. And Manchester United were awful that day. Whereas I do think they've improved since then, albeit it's coming from a low bar. So I think they're facing a better Man United team, but I still think Newcastle have got too much for them.
Let's hope so. I think the midfield was so important last time. Midfield battered Manchester United at Old Trafford, and you're looking at Newcastle's midfield. If everyone's fit and available, it's such a strong midfield with Tindall, who we seem to praise every week, every video. Bruno, who I think has been maybe a bit hot and cold in recent weeks, but again is a leader on and off the pitch, and is sort of been, I think, the captaincy he's taken in his stride a lot.
100%.
And then Joe Linton, remember that game against Old Trafford, brilliant, scored a goal. Maybe not quite with his head. But these are players who I think the game would be won and lost in the midfield, and Newcastle's midfield at the moment just very confident about it.
And then you've got the old boys in Manchester United's midfield. But actually, Casemiro's done alright last few games, but he was really poor down the previous game, along with Eriksen. I think Ruben Amorim got his selection really wrong that day, and I'm sure you'll learn from this one. But you look at Manchester United. They've got a big second leg against Lyon.
Yes.
4 days later. Realistically, they're not Man United. The best case scenario for them is they go and finish in the top half. They can't get European football through the league.
Yeah.
So what have they got to gain from the game against Newcastle United? Their priorities rest elsewhere, because the Europa League is their only way of getting back into Europe.
Put all the eggs in that basket, really. That's what it is for them, I'd say. Premier League, Europe, it could drop to sort of be where they'd have an outside chance, but you've got a better chance of winning a few games and winning the Europa League, which, even for Manchester United, as poor a season as they've had, is a winnable competition.
And they can't do it as well, because they've been, I see they've been crap the last couple of years. They were crap, finished third, then won the cup. But they were
worse
poor
last year.
And they were poor last year. They finished 8th last year, won the FA Cup. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise if they end up finishing 16 when they win the Europa League. They just win things. It's just what they are. They're a winning football club. But I think Newcastle got a number at the minute, and I'll say on you now, I think they'll get a result on Sunday. I think they'll be quite comfortable on it. That
Big claim from the Geordie Journos. And on that note, before we return in a second, here's a word from our sponsors. Comply IT Limited. Worrying about disposing of your old IT equipment? Don't be. Comply IT handle everything. Secure collection, detailed tracking, and certified data destruction. That's Comply IT Limited. We've also got Mitigate. Mitigate enhances workplace mental health, helping businesses stay compliant, reduce absences, and unlock higher productivity, creating healthier, happier teams. And of course, our OG sponsors, Four Rivers Financial Planning. Four Rivers Financial Planning offer holistic financial advice for all stages of life, ensuring your plan remains robust and adaptable in the ever-changing world we live in. So those were our 3 sponsors, links in the description below. There's also a little bit of an update. You, me and Liam taking part in a charity football game tomorrow.
Yeah, at the Newcastle United Foundation. We're joining the Loaded Mag, NUFC, YouTube has Pete.
Third year running.
Yeah, Pete, Daz and Chris are travelling from all their different corners of the... There's 2 in the UK and 1 abroad in Ireland. They're travelling to Newcastle to take part in the charity football match, and then they're going to be at the Manchester United game on Sunday. But yeah, we're playing against Newcastle Fans TV.
Yes. It's a bit of a YouTube derby, isn't it?
This is a YouTube derby. We've played the last couple, lost both. So hopefully this is our year. But this will be my first kick of a football in about 4 months. So I'm a bit apprehensive.
You'll be fine.
But I'll always give my all good for the boys. So yeah, we'll put the link in the description. So if you want to donate at all in aid of an autism charity, great cause. So we'll put that in the in the link, the description below, sorry, and if you've got any pennies, money to spare, then please donate. And yeah, I'm sure I will offer an update on what happens tomorrow.
Well,
maybe.
We'll see. If we win, we will.
Yeah.
If we lose, you know what happened.
Exactly, yeah. If we lose, this is the last we get out of it.
So yeah, this has been Geordie Journos from the Newcastle United Media Centre. We'll be back as a 3 tomorrow at the Newcastle Foundation, but be back filming videos at St James's Park on Sunday, hopefully speaking about another win for Newcastle United against Manchester United. So if you like what we do, please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, ring the bell for all your Geordie Journos content. We'll see you on Sunday. Cheers.